The thunder of a distant storm echoed across the parched landscape as Rose Caldwell stared at the crumpled letter in her trembling hands, the ink smudged with her tears. Her family's ranch was lost, her father dead, and now she stood on the precipice of a decision that would determine the rest of her life. A marriage of convenience to a man she'd never met, a wealthy cattle baron who needed a wife but had no interest in love. She had already agreed, but as the stagecoach approached the town of Willow Creek, Montana Territory, 1876, Rose questioned if she had made the right choice. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty Main Street. Rose gathered her meager belongings and stepped down onto the hard, packed earth. The journey from Boston had been long, leaving her exhausted and heartsick. Her once fine blue dress was wrinkled and dusty, her boots scuffed beyond repair. "Miss Caldwell," a deep voice called out. She turned to see a tall man with broad shoulders approaching. His sun-bronzed face was partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see piercing green eyes studying her with interest. "Yes, I'm Rose Caldwell," she replied, lifting her chin despite her nervousness. "Garrett Lawson," he introduced himself with a tip of his hat. "I work for Mr. Richardson. He sent me to fetch you." Rose felt a flutter of disappointment, so her intended hadn't even bothered to meet her himself. "I see, thank you, Mr. Lawson. Just Garrett, madam. Or some folks call me the Willow Creek Wrangler," he added with a hint of a smile. "Been working for the Richardson outfit for 5 years now." As he loaded her trunk onto his wagon, Rose took in the town. Willow Creek was nothing like Boston, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, a saloon already noisy despite the early hour, a general store, and what appeared to be a small church at the far end. "How far is Mr. Richardson's ranch?" she asked as Garrett helped her onto the wagon seat. "Silverpine Ranch is about an hour's ride, one of the biggest spreads in the territory." Garrett clicked his tongue and the horses began moving. "Mr. Richardson's been expanding his holdings considerably these past few years. And what sort of man is he?" Rose couldn't help asking. She had only exchanged a few letters with Edward Richardson, most discussing the practical aspects of their arrangement. Garrett's expression tightened. "Mr. Richardson is a businessman first and foremost. He's fair with his dealings, pays well." He paused. "Forgive me for asking, but you two ain't never met." "No," Rose admitted. "Our arrangement was made through correspondence." Garrett gave her a sideways glance but said nothing more as they left the town behind. The Montana landscape spread before them, vast rolling plains giving way to distant mountains, the sky larger than Rose had ever seen it. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "That it is," Garrett agreed. "Different from back east, I reckon. Very, I've never seen such open space." The land seemed to go on forever, making her feel both free and terribly small. They rode in companionable silence for a while. Rose found herself studying Garrett from the corner of her eye. Unlike the refined gentleman she'd known in Boston, everything about him spoke of hard work and resilience. His hands were calloused, his skin weathered by sun and wind, but there was a gentleness in how he handled the horses and a quiet confidence in his posture. "Been out west long?" he eventually asked. "This is my first time. I've lived in Boston my entire life." What brings a Boston lady out to Montana Territory to marry a man she's never laid eyes on? Though his tone remained conversational, the question cut straight to the heart of her situation. Rose considered deflecting, but found herself answering honestly. "My father passed away 6 months ago. The business failed and we lost everything. Mr. Richardson answered an advertisement I placed seeking a position as a governess. He offered an alternative arrangement." Garrett nodded slowly. "I'm sorry about your father. Thank you." She looked away, blinking back tears. "The arrangement makes sense. He needs a wife to establish respectability, manage his household, and possibly provide heirs. I need security and a roof over my head." "And love?" Garrett asked quietly. Rose's laugh was hollow. "Love is a luxury I can no longer afford, Mr. Lawson. I agreed to a loveless union. It's practical, and I'm at peace with that." Garrett fell silent, his jaw tightening as he urged the horses to a faster pace. The next half hour passed without conversation, each lost in their own thoughts as the landscape gradually changed. They began to see more signs of cattle grazing on the hillsides, and eventually, a large ranch house came into view. Silverpine Ranch was impressive, a two-story wooden structure with a wide porch and numerous outbuildings. Several cowboys were working in the corrals, and smoke rose from the chimney of what appeared to be a cookhouse. As they pulled up to the main house, Rose's stomach knotted with anxiety. This was to be her home, her future. "Mr. Richardson ain't here," Garrett said, helping her down from the wagon. "He rode to Helena 3 days ago on business, likely won't be back for another week." Rose tried to hide her shock. "He knew I was arriving today." Garrett's expression was apologetic. "Business comes first with him, madam. Mrs. Peters is the housekeeper. She'll get you settled." As if on cue, an older woman with iron-gray hair emerged from the house. "You must be Miss Caldwell. Welcome to Silverpine." Her smile was warm, but her eyes carried a hint of pity that made Rose uncomfortable. "Thank you, Mrs. Peters." "I'll bring your trunk up," Garrett said, already lifting it from the wagon. The interior of the ranch house was far more lavish than Rose had expected. Fine furniture, expensive rugs, and oil paintings adorned the spacious rooms. Mrs. Peters showed her to a large bedroom on the second floor. "Mr. Richardson had this room prepared for you," the housekeeper explained. "The bathroom is through that door." "We have running water." Mr. Richardson insisted on modern conveniences. Rose nodded, overwhelmed by the grandeur and the situation. Once alone, she sat heavily on the bed, exhaustion and doubt washing over her. A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. Garrett stood in the doorway, her trunk at his feet. "Where would you like this, Miss Caldwell?" "By the window is fine, thank you." He moved the trunk easily, then lingered. "I know this ain't my place, but are you all right?" Rose managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just tired from the journey. I'll be fine after some rest." Garrett studied her face. "If you need anything at all, most folks can point you my way. I'm usually working with the horses or out on the range." "That's very kind of you." After he left, Rose unpacked her few belongings, trying to find comfort in establishing some semblance of normalcy. From the window, she watched Garrett walk toward the stables, his tall figure cutting a striking silhouette against the setting sun. The next morning, Rose awoke determined to make the best of her situation. After dressing in one of her simple day dresses, she went downstairs to find Mrs. Peters preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mrs. Peters. Is there something I might help with?" The housekeeper looked surprised. "Oh no, Miss Caldwell. Mr. Richardson wouldn't want his future wife working in the kitchen. Please, I'd like to contribute somehow. I'm not used to idleness." Mrs. Peters hesitated, then nodded. "Well, you could help me knead this dough for the bread. Over breakfast, Mrs. Peters explained the running of the ranch. "Mr. Richardson employs 20 men regularly, more during roundup season. The foreman is Sam Turner. He handles most of the day-to-day operations. Garrett Lawson is the head wrangler, in charge of the horses and training the new stock." "And what are my expected duties?" Rose asked. "Mr. Richardson said you'll be mistress of the house, hosting dinner parties for business associates, managing the household accounts, overseeing the domestic staff." She paused. "There aren't many social occasions out here, but Mr. Richardson entertains important guests from time to time." Later that morning, Rose decided to explore the ranch. The day was clear and mild, perfect for walking. She found herself drawn to the sound of activity coming from the horse corrals. Garrett was in the center of a round pen, working with a spirited young buckskin horse. He moved with fluid grace, speaking in low tones to the animal as it circled him nervously. Rose watched, fascinated by the communication between man and horse. After several minutes, the horse slowed and finally approached Garrett, lowering its head to breathe against his outstretched hand. "That's remarkable," Rose said, unable to contain her admiration. Garrett turned, a genuine smile lighting his face when he saw her. "Just patience and understanding. Horses are honest creatures. They respond to how you treat them. Unlike people," Rose suggested with a small smile, "sometimes." He patted the buckskin's neck. "This is Sunfire. He's going to make a fine cow horse once he learns to trust. May I?" Rose gestured toward the horse. "Sure, just move slow and let him come to you." Rose approached carefully, extending her hand as she'd seen Garrett do. After a moment's hesitation, Sunfire stretched his neck to sniff her fingers. "He likes you," Garrett observed. "I've always loved horses," Rose admitted. "We couldn't afford to keep them in the city, but my grandfather had a small farm outside Boston when I was a child. I used to ride his old mare." "Would you like to ride again?" Garrett asked. "I could saddle something gentle for you." Rose hesitated. "I'm not sure it would be appropriate." "Why not? This is going to be your home. The land around here is beautiful. Best way to see it is from horseback." She found herself nodding. "Yes, I'd like that very much." Within half an hour, Garrett had saddled a calm chestnut mare named Copper. He helped Rose mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "We'll just take it easy today," he said, swinging onto his own horse, a tall gray gelding. "Let you get reacquainted with riding." They rode at a leisurely pace, Garrett pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the area. Rose gradually relaxed, finding joy in the rhythm of the horse beneath her and the spectacular scenery. "That ridge there marks the northern boundary of Silverpine," Garrett explained. "Richardson's been trying to buy the valley beyond it for years, but old man Jenkins won't sell." "It seems Mr. Richardson already has plenty of land," Rose observed, surveying the vast property. "Some men are never satisfied with what they have," Garrett replied, a note of disapproval in his voice. They stopped by a small creek to rest the horses. As they sat on a fallen log, Rose gathered her courage to ask the question that had been bothering her. "Mr. Lawson Garrett, what kind of man is Edward Richardson, truly? You've worked for him for years. You must know him well." Garrett was silent for a long moment, skimming a stone across the water. "Mr. Richardson is complicated. He's driven, ambitious, treats his workers fairly enough, pays on time." He paused. "But he's not a man given to sentiment or warmth. The ranch is everything to him, expanding it, making it profitable." "I see," Rose said quietly. "If you don't mind my asking, why did you agree to marry him?" Rose stared at the rippling water. "I had few options after my father died. I discovered he'd been gambling heavily, mortgaged everything we had. When he passed, the creditors took it all." Her fingers twisted in her lap. "I could have become a governess or a companion to some wealthy widow, but then I would always be dependent on the goodwill of others. As Mr. Richardson's wife, I'll have stability, a position." "And is that enough for you?" Her gaze met his, finding concern rather than judgment. "It has to be." The days passed in a similar fashion. Rose found herself settling into life at Silverpine, helping Mrs. Peters with household tasks despite the housekeeper's protests, reading books from Mr. Richardson's surprisingly well-stocked library, and most enjoyably, riding with Garrett. He proved to be excellent company, knowledgeable about the land, thoughtful in conversation, and possessed of a dry humor that often made her laugh. Unlike the prim gentleman of Boston society, Garrett was refreshingly direct and honest. During their rides, Rose learned that he'd come west as a boy with his father after his mother died. They'd worked various ranches before his father was killed in a stampede when Garrett was 16. He'd been on his own ever since, working his way up from ranch hand to his current position. "Do you ever think of having your own place?" Rose asked as they rode along a ridge offering a spectacular view of the valley below. "Used to dream of it," Garrett admitted. "Been saving up for years. Got my eye on a small spread about 20 miles north of here." "Why haven't you bought it?" "Price keeps going up," he said with a wry smile. "And truth is, I'm comfortable here, know the land, the stock." He glanced at her. "But I still think about it, having something that's mine, building it up my own way." As they returned to the ranch that afternoon, they spotted a cloud of dust on the road approaching Silverpine. "Looks like Mr. Richardson's back early," Garrett said, his expression becoming more guarded. Rose felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. After a week at the ranch, the reality of her impending marriage had begun to feel distant. Now it rushed back with alarming force. They rode back to the stables in silence. As Garrett helped her dismount, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for the ride," Rose said, suddenly formal. "My pleasure, Miss Caldwell." His use of her surname felt like a return to reality. "I reckon you'll want to freshen up before meeting Mr. Richardson." Rose nodded, hurrying toward the house. In her room, She changed quickly into her best dress, a deep blue that complemented her auburn hair and pinned her hair into a neat arrangement. Her reflection in the mirror showed a young woman of 22, her blue eyes wide with apprehension. When she came downstairs, a man was standing in the study with his back to her, examining papers on the desk. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. Edward Richardson was older than she had expected, perhaps in his early 40s. He was of medium height with a sturdy build, his dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. His face was handsome in a severe way, with sharp features and calculating brown eyes that assessed her coolly. "Miss Caldwell, I presume." His voice was deep and cultured. "Edward Richardson." "Welcome to Silverpine." "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Rose extended her hand, which he took briefly. "I apologize for not being here upon your arrival. Business in Helena required my attention. Mrs. Peters has been very kind in your absence." Richardson nodded absently. "I trust everything has been satisfactory. Your accommodations?" "Yes, very comfortable, thank you." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. I believe we have matters to discuss." Rose perched on the edge of the seat while Richardson remained standing, pacing slowly before the fireplace. "I want to ensure we understand each other clearly, Miss Caldwell. I require a wife to manage my household and provide a respectable front for my business dealings. In return, you will want for nothing materially. The marriage will take place in 2 weeks' time, conducted by the Reverend from town." "So soon?" Rose couldn't hide her surprise. "I see no reason to delay. I've already had the legal papers drawn up regarding the financial arrangements." He handed her several documents. "You'll find everything quite fair. In the event of my death, you would receive a generous pension. Should the marriage produce children, they will inherit Silverpine." Rose scanned the papers, feeling oddly like she was reviewing a business contract rather than discussing marriage. "Everything seems in order." "Excellent." Richardson finally sat in the chair opposite her. "Now, is there anything you wish to discuss?" 1,000 questions raced through Rose's mind, but she settled on one. "What will be expected of me as your wife? As I mentioned, you'll oversee the household, entertain guests when necessary. I often have business associates visit from Helena or even Chicago." He paused. "And of course, there is the matter of heirs. I wish to have children to carry on my legacy." Rose felt her cheeks warm at the implied intimacy. "I understand. I should clarify that while this is a practical arrangement, I will treat you with respect and consideration. I am not an unreasonable man, Miss Caldwell. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Richardson." He checked his pocket watch. "I have matters to attend to. We will dine together this evening at 7. We can become better acquainted then." After he left, Rose remained seated, feeling strangely hollow. The meeting had confirmed her suspicions this would indeed be a loveless union, a business transaction with benefits for both parties. She had known this, had agreed to it, yet somehow the reality was more stark and cold than she had imagined. At dinner that evening, Richardson questioned her about her background and education. He seemed pleased to learn she had attended a prestigious ladies' academy in Boston and was well versed in household management. "My business often takes me away from Silverpine," he explained. "I'll need to rely on you to maintain order in my absence. I understand. I'm capable of handling such responsibilities. I believed as much from our correspondence. You struck me as a practical, intelligent woman." He took a sip of wine, a rare combination. The compliment, delivered without warmth, did little to put Rose at ease. Throughout the meal, she found herself comparing Richardson's stiff formality with Garrett's easy manner, his calculated conversation with Garrett's genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. The following days fell into a new routine. Rose spent her mornings with Mrs. Peters, learning about the running of the ranch house. Afternoons were often occupied with Richardson, who took her on tours of the property, explaining his operations and future plans for expansion. "I intend to make Silverpine the largest cattle operation in the territory," he told her as they drove around the property in his buggy. "Within 5 years, I expect to double our current holdings." "That's very ambitious," Rose remarked. "Ambition builds empires, Miss Caldwell." "My father was a tenant farmer who never owned so much as an acre. I've created all this through determination and strategic thinking." There was pride in his voice, but no joy. Rose found herself missing her rides with Garrett, who seemed to have made himself scarce since Richardson's return. She caught glimpses of him working with the horses or heading out with the other ranch hands, but their easy camaraderie had vanished. One afternoon, she managed to slip away to the stables while Richardson was occupied with his foreman. She found Garrett brushing down Sunfire, the buckskin now much calmer under his care. "He's coming along nicely," she said by way of greeting. Garrett looked up, surprise and something else, pleasure, flashing across his face before his expression became neutral. "Miss Caldwell." "Yes, he's learning to trust. That's the hardest part. I've missed our rides," Rose admitted. Garrett continued brushing the horse. "Didn't think it would be appropriate now that Mr. Richardson's back. I suppose you're right." She stepped closer, running a hand along Sunfire's neck. "Mr. Richardson isn't much interested in horseback riding. He prefers to survey his kingdom by buggy." The corner of Garrett's mouth quirked upward. "Kingdom, huh? That's how it feels sometimes. He speaks of the ranch as if it were an empire he's building. And you'll be his empress." There was no mockery in Garrett's tone, only a quiet sadness. "Hardly, more like his chief administrator," Rose sighed. "The wedding is in 10 days. Garrett's brush strokes became more vigorous. "Congratulations." "Don't," Rose said softly. "Please don't pretend this is something to celebrate." He finally looked at her directly. "What do you want me to say, Rose? That I think you're making a mistake? That Richardson sees you as another acquisition for his collection? That you deserve better than a loveless marriage?" His words hung in the air between them. Rose felt her heart pounding against her ribs. "I made my choice, Garrett. I agreed to this arrangement. Choices can be unmade," he said, his green eyes intense. "You're not his property yet. And what would you have me do? Go back to Boston with nothing? Become a seamstress or a shop girl, one step away from destitution? You could." He stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind, it's not my place." "Tell me," Rose insisted. "You could stay here, but not as Richardson's wife. I told you I've been saving for my own place. It's not much, nothing like Silverpine, but it could be a home, a real home." Rose stared at him, stunned by the implied offer. "Garrett, we've known each other barely 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I've seen more life and spirit in you than Richardson would notice in a lifetime." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I'm not a wealthy man, Rose, and I can't promise you the material comforts Richardson can, but I can promise you this: you'd never be just a convenience to me." A sound from outside the stable made them both start. Rose stepped back, her mind reeling. "I should go," she whispered. "Mr. Richardson will be looking for me." Garrett nodded, his jaw tight. "Think about what I said, please." Rose hurried back to the house, her thoughts in turmoil. Garrett's words had voiced feelings she'd been trying to ignore since her arrival at Silverpine, the growing attraction between them, the ease of their companionship, the way her heart quickened whenever he was near. But she had made a commitment to Richardson. Breaking it would mean scandal, uncertainty, possibly even hardship. And yet, the thought of a lifetime with Richardson, respected but unloved, comfortable but unfulfilled, suddenly seemed unbearable. That evening at dinner, Richardson announced, "I've invited several business associates to dine with us tomorrow. It will be a good opportunity for you to practice your role as hostess." "Of course," Rose agreed. "How many guests should we expect?" 6, including the banker from Helena and his wife. It's important that we make a favorable impression." He studied her across the table. "You seem distracted this evening, Miss Caldwell. I apologize. I'm simply adjusting to the changes in my life. Understandable, change can be difficult." His tone softened slightly. "I want you to know that I selected you from among several potential candidates. Your letters revealed an intelligence and pragmatism I found appealing. I believe we will suit each other well." It was perhaps the warmest sentiment he had expressed, yet Rose felt no comfort from it. She was still just a selection, a suitable candidate, a practical choice. Later that night, unable to sleep, Rose stood by her window gazing at the moonlit landscape. In the distance, she could see a small light burning in the bunkhouse where Garrett lived with the other ranch hands. Was he awake too? Thinking of their conversation, the dinner party the following evening was a formal affair. Rose wore her finest dress, a green silk that had belonged to her mother. Richardson presented her to his guests with cool pride, as if showing off a prized acquisition. Miss Caldwell will become Mrs. Richardson in just over a week, he informed them. We're fortunate that she agreed to leave Boston society for our rugged Montana. The guests, mostly middle-aged businessmen with their wives, were polite, but reserved. Rose found herself performing the role expected of her, serving as gracious hostess, keeping conversation flowing, ensuring everyone's comfort. It was a role she had been trained for since girlhood, yet it felt hollow now. Through the dining room window, she caught a glimpse of Garrett crossing the yard to the stables, his tall figure unmistakable even in the gathering dusk. Her heart gave a painful twist. Miss Caldwell has been exploring the ranch quite thoroughly, Richardson was saying. She's taken quite an interest in the operations. It's important to understand one's surroundings, Rose replied. I've been fortunate to have knowledgeable guides. Indeed, my head wrangler, Lawson, has apparently been giving riding lessons. There was something in Richardson's tone that made Rose glance at him sharply. His expression revealed nothing, but she sensed disapproval. After the guests departed, Richardson invited Rose to join him for a brandy in his study. His manner was different now, more calculating, watchful. You performed admirably this evening, he said, handing her a small glass. Mr. Hargrove was particularly impressed. Thank you. Richardson studied her over the rim of his glass. I noticed you watching the yard during dinner. Were you looking for someone in particular? Rose felt a chill. No, just admiring the sunset. Interesting, as the sun had already set. He set his glass down with deliberate care. Miss Caldwell, I value honesty above most virtues, so I will ask you directly, what is the nature of your relationship with Garrett Lawson? He has been kind enough to show me the property and teach me about the horses, Rose answered, striving to keep her voice steady. And has his kindness extended beyond that? Mr. Richardson, I'm not sure what you're implying. I am implying nothing. I am asking a direct question. His voice remained calm, but his eyes had hardened. Several of my men have commented on the amount of time you've spent in Lawson's company, time alone, riding to remote parts of the property. Rose felt her face flush with anger. Are you having me watched? I protect my interests, Miss Caldwell. You have agreed to be my wife. I expect loyalty. I have done nothing disloyal, Rose insisted, though her conscience prickled at the memory of her conversation with Garrett in the stables. Good. Then you won't mind if I ask Lawson to focus on his duties with the horses and leave your riding instruction to someone else. Perhaps my foreman's wife could accompany you instead. It wasn't a suggestion. Rose understood she was being ordered to stay away from Garrett. As you wish, she said stiffly. Richardson nodded, apparently satisfied. I don't wish to seem controlling, Rose, but our arrangement requires mutual respect and adherence to certain proprieties. Later, alone in her room, Rose paced in agitation. Richardson's questioning had clarified one thing: her feelings for Garrett were far from hidden, at least to observant eyes. And if Richardson had noticed, what were the other ranch hands saying? More importantly, what was she going to do about it? The wedding was just over a week away. She had given her word, signed papers, made commitments. To back out now would cause scandal and potentially leave her in a precarious position. Yet the thought of never speaking freely with Garrett again, of living day after day in Richardson's calculated presence, made her feel as if she were suffocating. The next morning, Rose awoke to the sound of raised voices. Looking out her window, she saw Richardson confronting Garrett near the corral. Though she couldn't hear their words, Richardson's rigid posture and Garrett's clenched fists told her enough. The conversation ended with Garrett stalking away toward the stables while Richardson watched with cold satisfaction. At breakfast, Richardson informed her, Lawson will be taking a string of horses to our northern pasture. He'll be gone for several days. Rose kept her expression neutral despite the pain that lanced through her. I see. I've asked Mrs. Turner to accompany you if you wish to ride. She's an accomplished horsewoman. Thank you, but I think I'll focus on preparations for the wedding. There's still much to be done. Richardson nodded approvingly. A wise decision. I've arranged for the minister to visit tomorrow to discuss the ceremony. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Rose threw herself into wedding preparations, reviewing menus with Mrs. Peters and finalizing arrangements for the small reception that would follow the ceremony. All the while, her thoughts kept returning to Garrett, wondering where he was, if he was thinking of her, if she would see him again before making vows to another man. That night, she was awakened by a soft tapping at her window. Heart racing, she slipped from bed and pulled back the curtain to find Garrett balanced precariously on the branch of a large oak that grew alongside the house. She quickly opened the window. "Garrett, what are you doing? You could fall." "Had to see you," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Richardson ordered me to stay away from the main house, said if I came near you again, I'd be fired without references." "He confronted me too," Rose admitted. "He suspects something between us." "Is there something between us, Rose?" Garrett's eyes searched hers in the moonlight. "Because I can't stop thinking about you, can't stop wondering what it would be like if things were different." Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. "It doesn't matter what I feel, I've made a commitment. It matters to me." He reached through the window, his hand warm against her cheek. "Rose, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never felt this way about anyone. The thought of you marrying him, living here but separate from everything real and true." He shook his head. "It's killing me." "What would you have me do?" she whispered, leaning into his touch despite herself. "Come with me tonight. I've got 2 horses saddled by the creek. We can be halfway to my land by dawn." "That's madness. It would be scandal, ruin. It would be freedom, a chance at something real." His voice dropped lower. "A chance at love, Rose." She stared at him, torn between yearning and fear. "Garrett, I can't just run away in the night. It would be irresponsible, impulsive. Sometimes the heart knows what the head won't admit." He held her gaze. "You agreed to a loveless union, Rose. But I'm offering you something different. Let me teach you love again." His words struck her like a physical blow. Love again. Yes, she had loved once, believed in it, cherished it, built her dreams around it until her father's death had stripped away those illusions, forcing her to accept a colder reality. "I need time to think," she said finally. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "I'll wait by the creek until midnight if you don't come." He didn't finish the sentence. After he had climbed down and disappeared into the darkness, Rose sat on the edge of her bed, her mind and heart at war. The practical choice was clear: stay, marry Richardson, secure her future. But another voice, long silenced, urged her toward a different path, one of uncertainty but also possibility, of risk but also joy. By 11:30, she had made her decision. Moving silently through the darkened house, a small bag of essentials in hand, Rose slipped out the back door and made her way toward the creek. Her heart pounded with each step, fear and exhilaration coursing through her in equal measure. Garrett was waiting where he'd promised, holding the reins of 2 saddled horses. His face, tense with worry, broke into a smile of such genuine relief and happiness when he saw her that Rose's last doubts melted away. "You came," he said simply. "I came." She allowed him to help her mount, his touch sending warmth through her despite the cool night air. "We'll head north," Garrett explained as they rode at a careful pace away from the ranch. "There's an old line shack about 10 miles from here where we can rest for a few hours. By tomorrow evening, we can reach Johnson's Crossing. I know the station master there. He'll let us stay until we figure out our next steps." Rose nodded, the reality of what she was doing beginning to sink in. "Richardson will be furious. Let him be. You're not his property, Rose." "You're not anyone's property." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hooves and the occasional call of a night bird. The moon provided just enough light to follow the trail. "Are you afraid?" Garrett asked after they'd put several miles between themselves and Silverpine. "Yes," Rose admitted. "But not of this, not of being with you. I'm afraid of what might have become of me if I'd stayed, of the person I might have turned into, living that half-life." Garrett reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "I promise you this, Rose Caldwell. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, you'll never have to settle for a half-life with me." They reached the lined shack just as the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. It was a simple one-room structure built for cowboys working the distant pastures, but to Rose, it represented freedom. Inside, Garrett lit a small lamp, illuminating the sparse interior a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove. "It's not much," he said apologetically. Rose smiled, exhausted but strangely content. "It's perfect." While Garrett tended to the horses, Rose sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to fully contemplate what she had done. She had abandoned a secure future for an uncertain one, rejected respectability for potential scandal. Yet she felt lighter, more alive than she had in months. When Garrett returned, he built a small fire in the stove and heated coffee. They sat at the table, hands wrapped around tin cups for warmth, planning their next steps. "I have some savings," Garrett said. "Enough to make a down payment on that piece of land I told you about. It's good grazing country with a creek running through it. There's even a small cabin, nothing fancy, but it could be a start." "And how will we live until the land produces income?" Rose asked practically. "I've got skills that are always in demand out here. Breaking horses, ranch work, and I can sew, keep accounts, teach if needed," she smiled. "We'll manage, won't we? Together we will." Garrett's gaze was warm with promise. They rested for a few hours, Rose taking the bed while Garrett slept in a bedroll on the floor despite her protests. When they set out again, the day was well advanced. "We should reach Johnson's Crossing by nightfall," Garrett said as they rode side by side. "We can send a telegram to Richardson from there, explaining your decision." Rose nodded, though the thought of confronting Richardson, even by telegram, made her stomach knot with anxiety. What would his reaction be? Anger, legal action? Her worries were interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching rapidly from behind. Garrett reined in sharply, turning his horse to face the oncoming riders. "Richardson," he muttered, his expression grim. Rose's heart sank as she recognized the rancher at the head of a group of 4 men, including Sam Turner, the foreman. Richardson's face was a mask of cold fury as he brought his horse to a halt several yards away. "Miss Caldwell, Lawson." His voice was controlled, but rage simmered beneath the surface. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Rose doesn't belong to anyone," Garrett said firmly, moving his horse slightly in front of hers. Richardson's laugh was harsh. "I wasn't referring to her, though her behavior is certainly a matter we'll address. I was referring to the horses you stole, Lawson. That's a hanging offense in these parts." "I didn't steal them. I'm borrowing them." Garrett's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, causing Richardson's men to tense. "We'll return them once we reach Johnson's Crossing." "There's been a misunderstanding, Mr. Richardson," Rose interjected, desperate to defuse the situation. "I asked Garrett to help me leave. The blame is mine." Richardson's cold gaze shifted to her. "I expected better from you, Miss Caldwell. After all our arrangements, all my generosity, you repay me with this disgraceful display." "I'm sorry for any inconvenience I've caused you," Rose said, lifting her chin, "but our arrangement was a mistake." "I cannot marry you, cannot or will not. Both." She met his gaze steadily. "I agreed to a loveless union because I believed it was my only option. I was wrong." Richardson's expression hardened further. "And you think running away with a penniless horse wrangler is a better choice? How long before the romance fades and reality sets in? How long before you regret throwing away comfort and respectability for this? Adventure." His words struck uncomfortably close to Rose's own doubts, but she pushed them aside. "I'd rather face an uncertain future with hope than a certain one without it." "Very poetic," Richardson sneered. "Turner, take the horses. We're returning to Silverpine." The foreman moved forward, but Garrett's hand tightened on his gun. "Stay back, Sam." "I don't want trouble, but we're not going with you." The tension in the air was palpable. Rose held her breath, terrified that violence would erupt at any moment. Unexpectedly, it was Richardson who broke the standoff. "Let them go," he ordered abruptly, raising a hand to halt his men. "The horses aren't worth bloodshed, and Miss Caldwell has made her choice clear." Relief washed over Rose, but Richardson wasn't finished. "Know this, Lawson. You're finished in this territory. No reputable ranch will hire you after word spreads that you stole another man's woman and his horses." He turned to Rose. "And you, Miss Caldwell, I hope your romantic notions sustain you through the hardships ahead, because you'll find no charity from me or anyone who values my goodwill." With that, he wheeled his horse around and rode away, his men following reluctantly. Only Sam Turner glanced back, his expression unreadable. When they were out of sight, Rose let out a shaky breath. "Do you think he means it? About ruining your reputation?" "Probably," Garrett admitted. "Richardson has influence. But Montana Territory's a big place, and not everyone jumps to his command." He reached across to squeeze her hand. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," Rose said firmly. "I've made my choice." They continued toward Johnson's Crossing, reaching the small settlement just as dusk was falling. The town consisted of little more than a general store, a stagecoach station, and a small boarding house. Garrett led Rose to the latter, where a gray-haired woman greeted them with shrewd assessment. "Mrs. Hollister, this is Miss Rose Caldwell," Garrett introduced them. "We need lodging for a few days." "2 rooms?" Mrs. Hollister asked pointedly. "Yes," Rose answered quickly, her cheeks warming. The woman's gaze lingered on Rose's fine dress, now wrinkled and dusty from travel. $1 per night per room, meals included. "And I don't abide trouble in my establishment." "There won't be any trouble, madam," Garrett assured her. Their rooms were small but clean, separated by a narrow hallway. After a simple dinner of beef stew and cornbread, Rose excused herself, exhaustion from the day's events overtaking her. In the privacy of her room, she finally allowed herself to weep not from regret, but from the overwhelming magnitude of the changes she had embraced. She had abandoned security for uncertainty, propriety for potential scandal, a known future for an unknown one. A soft knock at her door roused her from her reflections. She opened it to find Garrett, concern etched on his features. "I heard," he stopped, seeing the tears on her cheeks. "Rose, what's wrong?" "Nothing, everything." She managed a watery smile. "I'm just overwhelmed." "If you're having regrets, no." She reached for his hand, drawing him into the room. "Not regrets, just realizing how much has changed in a single day." Garrett's thumb gently wiped away a tear. "We'll figure it out together, I promise." "I know." She looked up at him, this man who had turned her carefully constructed plans upside down, who had offered her a different vision of life, of love. "Garrett, when you said you wanted to teach me to love again, did you mean it?" His eyes, so green and earnest, held hers. Every word. Rose took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Then teach me." His kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. Rose answered by sliding her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. The kiss deepened, awakening sensations she had never experienced, making her heart race and her knees weaken. When they finally parted, both breathless, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he murmured. "We have time, Rose, all the time in the world." She nodded, though part of her wanted him to stay. Tomorrow we start planning our future." He kissed her once more, briefly but tenderly. "Good night, Rose." The next morning over breakfast, they discussed their options. Garrett had received word from a friend that a nearby rancher named Miller was looking for experienced help. "It's not much, but it would give us income while we save for our own place," he explained. "Miller's a good man, won't care about Richardson's opinions." "Then we should speak with him," Rose agreed. They spent 3 days in Johnson's Crossing. During that time, Rose sent a telegram to Richardson formally breaking their engagement and promising to return any advance funds he had provided for her journey west. She also wrote to Mrs. Peters, explaining her decision and apologizing for any inconvenience she had caused. On the 4th day, they rode to the Miller Ranch. Robert Miller was a weathered man in his 50s who listened to their story with surprising sympathy. "Richardson's always been too full of himself," he commented. "As for you, Lawson, I know your reputation with horses. Could use a man like you." He turned to Rose. "And you, Miss Caldwell, any skills that might be useful on a ranch, I can keep accounts, Mr. Miller." "I also sew, cook, and was educated as a teacher." Miller nodded thoughtfully. "My wife passed 2 years ago. Place has been running without a woman's touch since then. I've got 2 daughters, 12 and 14, who could use some schooling." He scratched his chin. "I can offer Lawson a job as horse manager. For you, Miss Caldwell, room and board in exchange for teaching my girls and helping with the house." "That's very generous," Rose said. "One condition," Miller added. "No impropriety under my roof. You understand my meaning." "Perfectly, sir," Garrett assured him. We intend to marry as soon as possible, Miller's expression softened. In that case, the old cabin by the creek is yours once you're wed, needs work, but it would give you privacy. They accepted Miller's offer with gratitude. The following Sunday, in the small church at Johnson's Crossing, with Miller and his daughters as witnesses, Rose and Garrett were married by a traveling preacher. Rose wore her blue dress, now carefully mended and pressed. Garrett had purchased a new shirt for the occasion, his usual work clothes replaced by the cleanest and finest he possessed. The ceremony was brief, the preacher clearly accustomed to performing weddings for couples in a hurry. But when Garrett slipped a simple gold band onto Rose's finger, purchased with a significant portion of his savings, and promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, there was nothing hurried about his words or the look in his eyes. "I, Rose Caldwell, take you, Garrett Lawson, to be my husband," Rose said, her voice clear and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." The words, traditional though they were, felt like a revelation. This was not the practical arrangement she had agreed to with Richardson. This was a promise made from the heart, a commitment born of choice and hope and, yes, love, a feeling she had believed lost to her forever. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Garrett's kiss sealed more than their marriage. It sealed a new beginning. The cabin by the creek became their home. As Miller had warned, it needed considerable work. The roof leaked, the windows were drafty, and the furniture consisted of little more than a bed frame, a table, and two mismatched chairs. But over the weeks that followed, they transformed it together. Garrett repaired the roof and floors, built shelves and a proper bed. Rose sewed curtains from fabric purchased at the general store, planted flowers around the doorway, and arranged their few possessions with an eye for comfort and beauty. It was a far cry from the luxury of Silverpine or her childhood home in Boston, but it was theirs, filled with laughter and warmth and love. Their days quickly fell into a rhythm. Garrett left early each morning to work with Miller's horses, returning at dusk with stories of his day. Rose taught Miller's daughters in the mornings reading, writing, arithmetic, and the social graces their father feared they were missing without a mother's guidance. Afternoons were spent managing the household, tending their small garden, and sometimes riding with Garrett to check fences or move cattle. In the evenings, they would sit on the small porch Garrett had built, watching the sunset paint the mountains with gold and purple. Sometimes they spoke of their dreams for the future, the land they would someday own, the children they hoped for, the life they would build together. Other times they sat in companionable silence, content in each other's presence. And at night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Garrett taught Rose that physical love could be a joy and a communion, not merely a duty. In his arms, she discovered aspects of herself she had never known existed: passion, playfulness, a capacity for pleasure that both startled and delighted her. "I never imagined it could be like this," she confessed one night, nestled against his chest. Garrett's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Like what?" "So complete, as if nothing is held back, nothing is hidden." She propped herself up to look at him. "Is it always this way?" His smile was tender. "Not always, but it can be when there's trust, when there's love." And is there love? They had spoken of many things in their weeks together, but neither had yet said those specific words. Garrett's hand cupped her cheek. "Rose Lawson, I have loved you since I saw you step down from that stagecoach, looking so brave and determined despite your fear. I loved you when we rode across this land together, when you faced down Richardson without flinching, when you took the greatest risk of your life by choosing an uncertain future with me." His voice roughened with emotion. "I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath." Tears welled in Rose's eyes. "I love you too, so much that sometimes it frightens me how quickly everything changed, how completely you've become the center of my world." "Don't be afraid," he whispered, drawing her close. "This is what we were meant for, not just surviving, but truly living." Loving. 6 months after their wedding, a letter arrived from Mrs. Peters. Richardson had married a banker's daughter from Helena, a practical union that seemed to satisfy both parties. Silverpine was expanding, with new land purchased to the west. and most surprisingly, Mrs. Peters wrote, Richardson had asked her to convey that the horses Garrett had borrowed were to be considered a wedding gift. He wished them well. A peace offering, Rose wondered aloud as they read the letter together. Garrett shrugged. Maybe he found what he needed after all. Or maybe he realized that some things can't be bought or arranged. Rose leaned against her husband's solid warmth. Some things have to be freely given. Like love, she thought, but didn't say. The love that had grown between them through the months of working side by side, facing challenges together, building a life from almost nothing. A year after leaving Silverpine, Rose and Garrett had saved enough to make an offer on a small piece of land adjacent to Miller's ranch. It wasn't large, just 80 acres with access to water and good grazing, but it was a start. Miller, who had come to regard them almost as family, offered to partner with them on cattle until they could build their own herd. We'll call it Willow Creek Ranch, Garrett suggested as they rode the boundaries of their new property. After the place we met, Rose smiled, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their first child was growing. I like that, a reminder of where our journey began. Garrett reached across to cover her hand with his. Who would have thought that a Boston lady and a Montana wrangler would find each other in such circumstances? I certainly didn't expect it, Rose admitted. I came west believing I had to choose security over happiness, practicality over love. And now, she turned to him, this man who had taught her to believe in love again, who had shown her that the greatest security lay not in wealth or position, but in being truly seen and cherished for who she was. Now I know the truth, she said softly. That the most practical choice of all is love. 5 years later, Willow Creek Ranch had grown from a small homestead into a modest but thriving operation. The original cabin had been expanded to include 2 additional rooms for their growing family, 3-year-old twins, a boy and girl with their father's green eyes and their mother's determined spirit. On the anniversary of the day they left Silverpine together, Garrett and Rose stood on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. Any regrets? Garrett asked, his arm around her waist, his voice holding a hint of their old teasing. Rose leaned into him, thinking of all they had built together, not just a ranch, but a life filled with purpose and joy. She thought of the difficult times they had weathered, drought, hard winters, setbacks that would have broken them had they faced them alone. And she thought of the countless moments of happiness, their children's births, quiet evenings by the fire, the satisfaction of seeing their dreams take shape day by day. Not one, she answered truthfully. You taught me what I had forgotten, that love isn't a luxury to be set aside when times are hard. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. Garrett's kiss was as tender as the first they had shared, yet deepened by years of knowing each other in every way possible. When they parted, his smile held all the warmth and promise that had drawn her to him from the beginning. Then I've kept my promise, he said softly, to teach you love again. Rose nodded, her heart full, and I've learned the lesson well. As night fell around them, they remained on the porch, talking quietly of plans for the future, secure in the knowledge that whatever came their way, they would face it together, partners in all things, bound not by necessity or convenience, but by the enduring power of a love freely chosen, freely given, that had transformed a loveless union into a life of immeasurable richness.